Hi.
Hi.
I've planned some icebreakers for us to do just before our interview. So all it is kind of like games, but getting to know you a bit better. The first one is Would You Rather?
Great.
So it would just be pick the first one that comes to your mind and then we'll go from there.
Great.
Okay, so sleep in or get up early?
Get up early.
Live in the country or the city?
Country.
Cook dinner or do the dishes?
Cook dinner.
Chocolate or vanilla?
Chocolate.
Horror movies or rom-coms?
Rom-com.
You're like me. Go on a cruise or go camping?
Camping.
Be able to turn invisible or fly?
Fly.
Shave all your hair off or lose all your teeth?
Shave all my hair off any day.
Have you shaved your hair off before?
I almost did, but my mum cried when I told her I was going to do it, so I decided to spare her heart.
Oh, I feel like you're the kind of person who would shave their hair off for some reason.
Yeah, I was ready to. I had a friend willing to do it, and my mum cried, and she was like, "What did I do wrong?" So I was like, "Okay."
Okay, I would never. I have like a really bumpy head, so I feel like if I shaved my head, it would just be like a weird shape. Okay, the next one is finish the sentence. This interview is going to be
Wonderful.
Oh, I love that. I can't be the only one who.
I don't care anything. I don't mind being the only one.
Oh. I found this banana in my
pocket.
One day I am going to.
Die?
Wow, I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah, it's part of the Buddhist practice to remember that impermanence is the nature of existence.
Wow.
Probably a lighter answer was expected, but...
Yeah, no, but I feel like when you said it, I didn't feel like, huh.
No,
I felt like, ah.
Yeah, that's exactly
weird.
how I feel about it.
Yeah. Okay. I was not expecting that. Have I ever told you that?
Have I ever told you that as a kid I dreamed about traveling?
No way.
Yeah.
Living the dream then, actually. At night, I hate to.
Think about what I didn't do.
Oh, yeah. Okay, and then the last one is nobody could stop me from.
Dancing. Or singing.
The first time I met you, or the first time I saw you, I think you were dancing.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. Okay, and then the next section is what, basically just random questions. What is, you have a phone, right?
Yeah.
Okay. It's just because we had the discussion about Instagram. I'm like,
do you even have a phone?
Okay, what is your phone wallpaper at the moment?
The Buddhist goddess of compassion, Tara.
Wow, okay. Do you have a nickname?
Yes, Meli.
Oh, that's cute. Is that from your parents?
My childhood.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. My nickname is Tika.
Oh.
If you could live anywhere on the planet and take everything you love with you, where would you live?
I love where I live already, Guatemala.
Oh. If you could be in a movie, what movie would you choose and who would you play?
I love, this is cheesy, Eat, Pray, Love.
I haven't actually seen that.
Okay, it's a woman on a spiritual
Julia
journey.
Roberts.
Yeah.
It's basically
my life. How original.
Okay. What 3 words would you choose to describe yourself?
Kind, enthusiastic, and playful, adventurous, maybe.
That's 4.
Oh.
I like playful. I think that's accurate. Yeah. And if there was one thing you could change about yourself today, what would it be?
Self-criticism. It's tiring at times. Oh my gosh.
Just be quiet. Be quiet. That was fun.
Yeah, really fun. Great questions.
Hey ladies, thanks for joining us here on another episode of the Woman Up podcast. We absolutely love your support. And I just want to take a moment to say, please subscribe wherever it is that you're watching from, whether it's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, it really doesn't matter where. It just really helps us grow and keeps the podcast going. If you're feeling especially inspired, please leave us a comment with feedback or even topic suggestions. It really means the world to us, and I personally read everything. So thanks in advance. We appreciate you, and let's get back to the episode. Melissa, hi.
Hi.
Welcome to the Woman Up podcast. You are my first episode since rebranding from A Cup of Positivity. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me along. I feel honored to be invited on your podcast. Yeah, I feel like it's always a blessing to be able to talk amongst women about the things that inspire us. So yeah, again, thank you.
I feel like it's special for me as well because one, you've like provided this amazing space, and two, I feel like we've been connected for a few years, like a good long amount, like 5 or 6 years. So it's, I wouldn't say an easy one for me, but it's a relaxed one for me because I feel like I can just be me and I'm comfortable with that.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah, I feel the same. I feel like any interactions we've had have always been really natural and authentic. So when you asked me, I didn't think about it. I was like, yes, I don't know when or how, but yes.
Okay. So let's go back to like how we met. I think it was like 6 years ago maybe, and we met at a yoga festival.
Yeah.
And I recently was thinking back whilst planning this episode about when I first met you. And I remember the moment, I think you were wearing like leopard print leggings.
Yep.
And you were doing a class which was like animal yoga or something to do with animal.
It was hip hop yoga, but I was participating in an animal flow yoga
Animal
as
flow,
well.
Yeah. And what's funny is that I remember seeing you and thinking, wow, she looks like really in her element and just like flowing, like there was just something special about you. And that's just always what I remember. So I remember the moment that I first saw you. But I think it's fitting because now you're like traveling and you're in your flow and everything. So that's why that came to mind. And I was like, she's literally embodied the first impression that I had of you. So yeah. Tell us about what you've been doing. I obviously know you've been traveling a lot. So just introduce yourself.
So I would say that from that moment that we met, I also remember meeting you, and I cherish that moment. I was a different version of myself, a version that aspired to travel. So things have really evolved since then. I think at the time I was still working in corporate, and I was saving up to be able to travel, and the sabbatical turned into a permanent move. Permanent, I say, because nothing's ever permanent. But then from the moment I met you, I then decided to go on a sabbatical, and then I ended up moving to Panama, lived there, and so I completely changed my life from having, a full-time job that had a guaranteed salary at the end of the month to teaching yoga wherever I could in hostels, to then organizing retreats. And then I made another move, and now I'm living in Guatemala. So I still travel to Europe to visit my family in the summer, and travel to offer retreats and teacher trainings wherever we decide to do them. So it feels like what I was aspiring to do then is now my reality, which I think is so important, to take moments in life to reflect. And there's a sentence that I love that says, your current life is your past dream. I think it's something like that. And I think sometimes we forget and we focus on what we want in the future, but just pausing and being like, wow, yeah, I dreamed of this, and now it's it's a reality. And I would say what really makes it a dream is not so much the traveling aspect, but living my dharma, sharing the teachings that I truly believe in my heart can make a difference in the world. Seeing how people come into teacher trainings and how they leave is really what inspires me to continue, and what makes me feel like, yeah, like this dream is being lived.
You said living your dharma, but what does that actually mean?
Oh, yeah. So in Sanskrit, there's a word called dharma, or dharma, which is right action, and your svadharma is your personal right action. So it doesn't come so much from the perspective that there's right or wrong, like not a judgment rather, but that everyone has a purpose. So everyone has a svadharma, and this is their right course of action. So I would say clearly your dharma is also to be working with women and to share all these tools that we both love and that many others benefit from. And so in this sense, I would say my dharma is to share spiritual teachings. I focus more on yoga, but really, anything that can help us live more blissful, more compassionate, more loving life are all practices that really inspire me. And so I think my dharma is to share these teachings. So I like to think that I'm simply a vessel for the teachings. So I receive them and I share them, and then those people share them, and in that way more people have access to these simple practices that can make life more easeful.
So when you said, when I met you, you think that was the time you were still in corporate. What was that life like for you? Like, did you feel like you were kind of in a cage and like you were dreaming of this other life, or like what brought you into corporate in the first place?
So I think it wasn't my dream that I was living, but a dream coming from a family where no one really studied. Being the first one to be able to go to university, and then my dad was like, you should do a master's, and I was like, I guess I'm gonna do the thing, and then finishing that and having the opportunity to work in corporate, because it was an opportunity. I realized after some time that actually I wasn't fulfilled. So I still think I enjoyed my life then, but when you use the word cage, that's exactly how I felt. I remember looking out the window and just looking at the time and being like, okay, just 1 hour to go. And of course now I still work, when we do teacher trainings, often the days are more than 12 hours because we wake the students up, and then at night we're planning the next day. So sometimes there'll be like 14, 15-hour days. But when you're doing what you love and you have a purpose, I never feel like I want it to end, I wake up so excited for the day to start, and same with the retreats. And so I think I realized when I started practicing yoga that there was something else that I could potentially do. And so then I did my teacher training. And then once I had done my teacher training and I had started teaching, I realized how unfulfilling my corporate job was. And I was very much, I think, daydreaming. and I think my manager was like, where do you go? Because you're here. So, and I was like, yes. And I started planning my sabbatical. And and that's when I started contemplating that my life could be different, because before I just thought that's what you did. You work, and like if you got to work in an office, actually you were privileged. So I was like, okay, I got it good, compared to my family. So how could I even think of changing things up? That I was lucky then, and I still think I was lucky. I think I was blessed to have that opportunity, but I also realized that it came with a cost, and the cost was being in an office 5 days a week, 7 hours a day. So
But you were already doing yoga just like in your own time, like as a hobby?
Yeah, so often I would teach yoga after work, or sometimes I taught at work between, like at lunchtime, or I would teach before work. So it was already part of my life. When we met, I was teaching at that festival. And so it was very much already in my heart that that was my purpose. I could see simply or feel the difference when someone walked into the class and then leaving the class and seeing how much I could help people. I think, we all have our roles and every role is equally important. And I do think that from a very young age, I really felt inspired to help people. And in my corporate job, I knew I was contributing to a positive, so I was basically checking working conditions in factories for a big corporation. And I knew it was positive. It was good work, but I couldn't see the results. Whereas when I saw someone walk into a studio and then walk out, I'd be like, oh, I can see a smile on their face, or like a weight lifted, or, maybe a tear was shed, and that's what was needed. And so I wanted to make that my full-time occupation, but I had no idea of whether that was possible or how it would happen.
So then what made you transition from that corporate life to then teaching yoga and traveling? Or did you actually just teach yoga in the UK for a bit first?
No, so I could see fellow teachers really having a bit of a hard time because they were working in different studios. So they were traveling, say an hour to get to a studio and then coming back, and then starting at 6 a.m. and finishing at 8 p.m. And I was thinking, I do want to do this, but the comfort of my salary was keeping, holding me, and I was like, health insurance and paid vacations, all of that's quite alluring, right? The illusion of security. And so my sabbatical was really the opportunity to see, to test the waters. While I was traveling, I taught a little bit. And then while I was traveling, I stayed in Panama for a few months, and I started teaching in hostels. And sometimes I would have no one show up or one person show up, and I'd charge $5. So I'd give $4, I'd keep $4, give $1 to the hostel. And so all of a sudden I was earning like $4 for, a 75-minute class. When before I didn't count, but I guess, I was definitely making more money than that. But on the other hand, I had my freedom, and I felt so grateful to be able to teach yoga, to anyone who wanted to practice. So it was definitely a transition. It didn't happen, from one day to the next. The sabbatical is what enabled me to discover that I could live in a much cheaper way, especially not living in London, and that I could earn a living teaching. And I always said to myself, if it doesn't work out, I have my 2 legs, my 2 arms, and a smile, and I can serve tables. I'll figure it out,
Yeah. Were you scared, when you made that first move?
For sure, yeah. I was scared to go traveling on my own. I was about to turn 30 when I went traveling, and I knew many people who had done it younger.
Yeah.
But it felt really intimidating, to go alone and not know. So there was also excitement, but also fear. And I also thought, what if I don't have enough money to pay for a return flight? I think a lot of my fears were around my finances, because that was perhaps the biggest change, because I knew I could adapt to any environment, or not any, but having moved countries or even continents at a relatively young age, I was like, I can adapt, I know that. But the fear of not having enough to pay rent, to pay for a flight to visit my parents, that was quite present for me. So I had to look at the fear and be like, okay, there you are, and I'm still going to do it. And I'm so glad to this day that I did.
In your mind, were you kind of like, I'm going to do this for X amount of time and then come back? Or was it always just like, I'm gone?
Yeah, I think when I left on my sabbatical, I really thought I would come back. I almost wanted to keep things in storage and, getting rid of things. I was just like, but I love this, and it was accepting. I was like, no, okay, this is really not only a like outer travel, but also inner journey of detachment, of letting go, of trusting. And so part of it was letting go of material things. So, but I had every intention of coming back to London, going back to my job. And when people told me that I wouldn't come back, I always thought it was funny, because I was like, why would you say that? I love my life here. You know, I have a community, I like my job, all is good. So why wouldn't I come back? But once I made the transition, I couldn't imagine myself going back to corporate. So that's when then I decided, okay, whatever happens, I can do anything. I'm quite happy to look after kids, to, you know, dog sit, I don't know, anything, like garden or anything. And I always had at the back of my mind, like, your energy is your currency, and as long as you have energy, you can do something with it, you know, offer your services. And
yeah, I love that. Your energy is your currency. I've never heard that. Talk me through like your plan, because I know you said you went on sabbatical, so that is like paid leave, right? No.
So a sabbatical is basically your job is kept for you for when you come back.
Okay.
But there's no remuneration. So when I decided to travel, when my sabbatical was accepted, I had a year before I was going. And although I knew that I could potentially work while I was traveling, I also wanted to have the freedom not to worry that I had to find a job wherever I went. So I started saving. I started working 7 days a week. Most weeks, often I would work like 3 weeks, 7 days a week, and then I'd take a day off. So I was a receptionist, I was a nanny, I was a waitress, and I still had my corporate job. I wasn't supposed to work so much with the corporate job because conflict of interest.
Yeah.
So I didn't speak about it much, but any opportunity to teach yoga, I would take it. And I think what kept me from burning out was really the drive, the inspiration to, like, I could feel tired, but I was still working towards this vision. I had a vision board with like palm trees and the sea, and I was like, no, I can do it. And I decided for a year, I decided to stop shopping, because although I never spent on designer things, I would shop casually, you know, like a little bit here, a little bit there. I also became more conscious of the impact of that. So I stopped going out for dinner. I had stopped drinking then as well. So a lot of things that I could afford when I was working, not saving, all of a sudden I cut back. And with all the work I was doing within a year, I saved enough to travel. My budget was on the lower end of a traveler. So while I was traveling, a lot of people were like, oh, I'm going, I don't know, like bungee jumping or rafting or all these things. And often I wouldn't take part. But I was just so happy to be traveling that I didn't mind. Like, I didn't go out for dinner. People who travel for 3 months sometimes have like a bigger budget and, you know, they want to go to all the restaurants. But I would buy food wherever I got to and cook and have a different traveling experience. But I never felt like I was missing out. Like, I was at peace with my, you know, I had my backpack and I was staying in dorms and hostels and teaching yoga when I could. And it meant that I could do it, when before to me it had seemed like a dream that only a few privileged people could do. And I still feel like I was privileged because I had the opportunity to work to do that.
Yeah.
But it definitely wasn't easy, the year of saving.
Yeah. So then once you left, you just decided, I'm just going to do whatever I can to make ends meet. But what did that actually look like? And what does that look like now?
At the time, I was very money conscious. So like I said, you know, like cooking, and when you eat vegetarian, it's also a lot cheaper if you're cooking. So like I remember in Mexico just you can buy cactus and like tortillas and beans and rice. And that's a super nutritious meal. So I was very much watching my budget, just because otherwise my trip would have been cut short.
Yeah.
Now I'm so happy to say that my situation is very different. I live in a country where the economy is very different to Europe, so I still spend a lot less than I spent when I lived in London. But I realize now that in London I spent a lot on like quick pleasures, you know, like going out for dinner and buying wine, and at the end of that spending like 30 pounds, like that translated to Guatemalan money is 300 quetzales. And that's, you know, to give you a perspective, like a meal, let's say, can be 15Q, which is £1.50.
Wow.
So you can eat a meal, a hearty meal, vegetarian meal for £1.50. So of course, you know, my approach to money, like coming back to London is always a bit jarring. I'm like, whoa, 20 pounds for the train? That's like,
yeah.
So I definitely, I can say, you know, it is what it is, but I think I was a bit of a shopaholic, whereas now I only buy secondhand clothes. So I think my needs changed. Like now I really value, I try to buy organic food as much as possible, not only for me, but for the earth. So I probably spend more than some people in Guatemala on more expensive fruit and veg if I can support a local person who grows organic food. But my expenses, I would say, are more like the flight to come to Europe to visit my family. But otherwise, I spend nowhere near as much, and I'm the happiest I've ever been. I like to share this, but like I don't have a hot shower at home, so I heat a bucket every day and shower with with like a little bowl. And my dad was like, surely you could find a place, you know, more expensive. And I'm like, but what for? Like simplicity, there's so much joy in simplicity. And before I thought that joy came from comfort and luxury. And I think many of us think that way, and it's not our fault. So it has been a work of deconstructing, of like having less and realizing how much joy can be experienced with less.
But now that you're in Guatemala, how long have you been there?
Almost 3 years.
Oh, okay. So would you say that's home now?
Yeah, for now.
Yeah. So I'm hearing everything you're saying in regards to like how you support yourself. But that money that does come in, is that all from yoga and your own stuff?
Yeah. So we have a yoga school with my, really she's my best friend, but I guess we're like business partners. And so this was Rachel's idea. She started the yoga school, and during COVID, she asked me if I would do yoga teacher trainings with her online. At the time, I was supporting myself only through teaching yoga classes and retreats every so often. And I was, you know, doing well enough that I could live well and visit Europe once a year. And then through the teacher trainings, we've been able to make enough income that we can do 3 a year. And then on the side, I teach, let's say I teach 1 class a week online, which is donation based.
Yeah.
And I receive enough, you know, to sustain me. Something that has really changed is before I would receive a set amount per month, and almost always I would spend almost all of that and keep maybe a little bit. Whereas now I really have to trust, because I get, let's say for a teacher training, a sum. Because we live in, well, she lives in Honduras, but because I live in Guatemala, I don't need the same kind of money that I needed when I lived here. But then I use that over a few months, and then I really have to trust that more will come.
Yeah.
And it's been like this for the past 6 years, so there's no reason not to trust. But it's really been a journey of learning to relate differently to money.
What would you say is like your biggest learning from this whole experience?
To trust in myself, because I haven't lacked. My mom lacked. So I think, you know, genetically, and my grandmother lacked.
Yeah.
So I've never had to go hungry, but I know my mom did. So I think I inherited my mom's fear, and bless her, of course, it wasn't intentional in any way, but, you know, we were always told to finish our food because not everyone has food to eat. So I think that is ingrained, you know, in your body, in your cells, this like, oh yeah, you don't know that you will always have food. So it has been to learn to trust in myself and my ability to generate income, because ultimately I'm the only person I can rely on. So then learning and being like, okay, yeah, I'm running low on funds, but also I'm creative, and fear in my personal experience just holds you back. So rather than fearing, trusting and being like, okay, I'm going to put out an online program. Why am I doing it? really, truly, because I want to share these tools with people. So it's not about selling something I don't believe in, which I think I would feel like, oh, icky about. But this is like, no, I truly, these tools have helped me and I can see how they help others. Of course, I want to share them with the world. I need to pay for my food and my living, but I always have donation-based offerings. And I've discovered people are often quite generous, even when it's donation-based, you know. So for me, it's really important that the teachings and the practices are accessible. So whether it's a retreat or a teacher training, we tend to have at least one scholarship. I give discounts, you know, if it's a single mom who wants to join a workshop. So I try not to focus too much on the money aspect. But I have to, you know, sometimes I have to be like, okay, wait, I do need to count, because I'm my own accountant, so I need to count some things, and then I'm like, no, it's fine. Yes, of course, come and pay what you can, or and that doesn't work for everything, of course. But I think it's really important to know that money is something that needs to flow rather than just be hoarded. So I trust that when I invest, I support a local business, I support a small family-owned business, that it's coming back
to you.
Yeah.
So if someone was like, I want to go through what you went through and I want to go traveling, like what piece of advice would you give them?
Plan. I think planning is really good, because I think we have so much power, and I don't mean power as in like I'm powerful in that way, more like we have power to make our dreams come true, but we have to, so plan, believe, because if we don't believe it, then it can't happen. So I really had to go through that, because many people are like, but how are you going to do it? How are you going to, saving in London is impossible, is something I heard a lot. And so making a plan. For me, it was like, okay, I don't spend that much on clothes, but maybe I spend, 10 quid a week. That's already 40 a month that I'm putting aside. And okay, I don't go out to dinner all the time, but so I made a plan, financial plan, really. I had like a little tracker, which I didn't love, because I was like, I always feel like I'm thinking about money, you know, but it made me more conscious of how much I spent. Believe, visualize. I think vision boards are great because it keeps reminding you, like, when my alarm rang at 5 a.m. on Wednesday morning in March and it was cold outside and I was going to teach a class, perhaps there was a part of me that was like, oh, I'm tired and I'm cold. But then I opened my eyes and I looked at my vision board and I was like, yes. And part of my vision board, it wasn't only for me, but part of the inspiration to share the teachings is because I believe in them, and I believe in the possibility of a happier humanity, which would mean a more peaceful world. So on my vision board, it wasn't just like, I want to make sure that's clear, that it wasn't just about like me benefiting and living my best life, but really like having a positive impact on the world. And I think instead of crying over the state of the world, I could use that energy to try my best to make a positive impact.
Do you have any like horror stories of traveling?
Yes. Yes. And initially I didn't really want to share because I thought that it could be discouraging. And then I realized that it's also important to show the whole picture. So I'm very trusting. I believe that everyone is good at heart. And I still believe that. I think just sometimes life experiences can just change that, alter that a little bit. And so once when I arrived in Costa Rica, a taxi driver told me that there were no buses leaving the city. Long story short, I believed him. He took $100 from me. At the time, my daily budget was $30. So for me, that was devastating. And then he put me on a bus. The bus driver told me that there was no bus strike, that I'd been lied to. I arrived in this tiny village. There was a national party, and as in like a celebration, and there were no hotels left. So I ended up sleeping in a brothel. These prostitutes saw me at 11 p.m. with like tears in my eyes, and they were the kindest. They took me in. They were like, well, I think we can find you a room in here. It wasn't the best night, you know, but in the worst situation, I didn't have to sleep rough. And, you know, women I didn't know who maybe people would be like, be careful, you know, they had compassion for me and they helped me out. So it was actually a really difficult situation that is now not a horror story. But like in the moment, I was like, what am I going to do? I'm going to sleep in the street and there's all these drunk people. And in the end, it was all okay.
Yeah. And women supporting women.
Yes. Exactly that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so the flip side is, do you have any amazing stories of traveling? I feel like you must have hundreds.
So many, yeah, so many. I think the common denominator is meeting local people who have experienced so much in their lives, who have such big hearts. So being invited into people's homes or into people's lives always feels like a really special opportunity. And I feel like when you travel, I'm fortunate enough to speak Spanish. So I think speaking the language means that people, or you can communicate very simply and more trust is built. So yeah, meeting people and being invited in their homes or sharing. There's so many instances where it's just been like, you know, getting a ride and in the car, just sharing a story. And I think really what my traveling experiences have showed me is that the vast majority of human beings are kind. And when they're not, I just know that it comes from a place of hurt.
Yeah.
But when people said like, you're going to travel through South America, Central America, South America, be careful, as if the people there were more dangerous than anywhere else. And what it gave me was like so much faith, so much trust that there is so much goodness in the world. So yeah, that's not one story, but a general feeling of trust and yeah.
I know you said that you were already doing yoga and you felt like that was your calling or your purpose. What about people that aren't really sure what their purpose is? So I come from corporate as well, and I always hated it. But I feel like it took me a while to figure out what my purpose is, and I'm still on that journey. So how do you find your purpose if you're not really sure, but you know that where you are right now doesn't feel right?
I think that's a really personal journey, and I want to answer two separate things. I think the first thing is that your job doesn't necessarily need to be your purpose. And on that positive story, this aligns because last year I went to Costa Rica, so the place where I got a taxi driver who tricked me and conned me, and you know, it was kind of a difficult experience. 5 years later, went to Costa Rica, and the taxi driver who picked me up, the Uber, was so friendly. And as soon as I got in, he gave me, there was like he had a bowl with little pieces of paper, and you could pick one, and it had like a saying or like a phrase, like an inspiring saying. And I was saying, this is someone whose dharma is to bring light. His dharma may not be to be an Uber driver. That's what he's doing to pay for his bills, but he's living his dharma, doing a job. And you can be in corporate, and your dharma might be to be a listening ear, to bring comfort into people's lives. So I think sometimes we think that we need, in order to live a fulfilling life, we have to do a job that is not in corporate. And I think you can totally live your dharma fully and be in corporate. I don't think there's, you know, for me, it really felt like it didn't align anymore. And I also think it's really important not to look at other people's lives, not to listen to other people's opinions. And that's really hard because, you know, at some point people were like, but you've saved all this money to go traveling, you could buy a house. And for a second I was like, could I buy a house? Could I get a mortgage? Should I do it? And then I was like, wait, that's not my dream. and the working in corporate was my family's dream, which was like, yes, you made it, you're doing the thing. And then I was like, but that's not my dream either. So sometimes it's really hard to know what your dharma is because you have so many influences. And so I think spending time alone, journaling, I think, a retreat. This is not about self-promotion anyway, but yoga teacher training is so much more than learning to teach yoga. It really is a deep dive within. And I think in that deep dive, some people finish teacher training and they're like, I want to be a kids yoga teacher, or actually I don't want to teach yoga, but now I know nature is my calling. I want to work on gardening or whatever it is. And your dharma can be your hobby as well, but you can also do it, you can embody your dharma. It can be inspiring women. It can be self-defense, whatever it might be. And I think teacher training is a great opportunity for that, because for 21 days, you're practicing meditation and yoga daily, you're eating healthily, you're in a space where you're asked, what lights you up? What do you want? What makes you feel alive? And it's not necessarily just yoga related, but a retreat, breath work, it can be so many things, but generally I would say looking within rather than looking without is more likely to give us answers.
Can you do yoga teacher training if you don't have much yoga experience?
Yeah, so for the 200 hours, we accept people with little experience because Rachel and I, so the friend that we do this with, really believe that it's such a powerful experience that it'll be beneficial to anyone. So we've had people come and they've been practicing for less than a year. And then we've had people in the same training who've been practicing for 15 years.
Wow.
Recently in a 300 hour, we had a 68-year-old.
Wow.
So this was her 300 hours. So she had done yoga before. But just to say that a lot of our limits are just our own limiting beliefs. I definitely didn't think I could be a yoga teacher when I did when I signed up. I was like, can I? Am I able to? Am I? But the journey is about discovering that you are, and yeah, it's so much more than yoga.
Yeah, I feel like I struggle with being consistent with yoga, but if someone just threw me in a retreat for a month, that would probably benefit me more.
Totally. And that's very much what it is that to create a consistent practice, you almost, maybe not everyone, but most people need to have the lived experience of the benefits of the practice. Otherwise, it's kind of like, they say it's good for me, so I guess I should do it. But when you practice every day for 21 days, we do 2.5 hour morning practice. It sounds long, but at the end of it, people are like, that's what I'm going to miss the most. I mean, other than the community and the delicious prepared veggie meals, it's not just that, but the morning practice becomes your sanctuary, the place you go to connect, to feel. And once you've experienced the benefits of that, it's a lot easier to go home and be consistent, because you know from experience, not from hearsay of how great it is, but from personal experience, you know how good it is. And so it's a lot easier for many people. For myself, it was the beginning of daily consistent practice was teacher training.
So where do you see yourself in 10 years' time?
I see myself doing the same because I love what I do so much. I would say retreats and teacher trainings for me are so nourishing because, well, they're the spaces also where I get to do longer practices. All the conversations about spiritual themes are inspiring for us as teachers because we study them again, we reflect on them, we talk about them, and then we get to share them again. And these teachings are really so deep that you can, sometimes people ask, like, don't you get bored about talking about the same things? But now I think it's been maybe almost 10 teacher trainings, I think. And I've never once thought like, oh, this again.
Yeah.
So I imagine myself still offering teacher trainings. And yeah, I've been delving more into sound now. So yoga has so many different branches as well. I'm very also interested in the tantric lineage, not to be mistaken as like sex parties, but what the tantric path looks like. And silence also is something. So sound and silence. So I aspire to be teaching and sharing everything that I'm learning at the moment. Sanskrit, I'd love to offer silent retreats as they've been so beneficial for me, but very much on the same path.
What are silent retreats? I know the name kind of spells it out, but just to clarify.
Sure, yeah. So there are different approaches to silence. Vipassana is one of them. The one that I participate in, the school is called Hridaya, which means spiritual heart. And so let's say the context is, so for 3, 10, or 17 days, you don't speak, you don't make eye contact, there are no mirrors, you don't use your phone, you can't read or listen to music, and you meditate for 6 to 8 hours a day. And the idea is really to integrate the teachings, because there is a teacher sharing the teachings. I feel like this sounds so mysterious, the teachings, but there's so much to be said about them. But the guidance is to look within, to look within, to look within. And in that journey, looking within, you discover that you are nothing and that you are everything. And there is so much freedom in that. And I say it, knowing that perhaps someone will hear that and be like, that just sounds really like, I don't know, like, what is it? You discover that you're nothing. But it's really about, that's the reason you don't use your phone or you don't have mirrors, because all this solidifies our idea of self. And the spiritual journey is about releasing this idea of self, realizing that it's all constructed. So silent retreats for me have been the revelation of everything I studied. An opportunity to experience these things, of like, oh, you are the whole universe in a drop, but just a drop in the ocean. And I've said a lot of these quotes before, and I was like, yeah. And then in silent retreats, I was like, okay, the idea of Melissa, like, what is that? It's just, you get so attached. I'm a woman, I'm this, I'm that, and that often brings suffering. And so letting go of that, I can come out and still, if someone calls me Melissa, I'm not like, who? Like, I get it. We're in this reality, and it's okay to recognize that we are also that, but we're not just that.
Yeah. That's amazing. I didn't know about the no eye contact thing. I thought it was just no speaking. But there's other people.
There's other people, and the no eye contact is really so that your journey is inwards. Because a lot of what we perceive to be us is the external gaze. And I know that, having come from a very people-pleasing way of being, I'm like, do you like me? Do you still like me? Are we okay? Do you need anything? So through your eyes, you could also be seeking that. If you make accidental eye contact with someone, it's, if it's a passing, it's okay. But the teacher created this because he went, Sahajananda, he's the founder of the school, and he's the only enlightened person I know, not on a personal level, but that I have presenced. And he went on solitary retreats on his own for 40 days at a time in a cave. And that's when he had his experiences of enlightenment. So he wanted to offer a space where he could recreate that. So the idea is that you don't interact with people. Like, they're there and he shares and he speaks, and then we meditate all together, but we don't interact with each other.
I don't know how I would meditate for that long. I struggle with like 15 minutes a day.
And when I started, 5 minutes felt like eternity. When I started, I would set my timer for 5 minutes and I'd be like, it's gotta be 5 minutes. Maybe it didn't ring. And then I was like, okay. And then from 5 minutes, it became 10 minutes and 15. And now an hour doesn't feel like so much. I must also be really honest that, on day 4, the 5th hour of meditation, sometimes I'm like, you know, like it's true. Like it's not always, it's not like my mind is blank for 17 days. Like there are moments of hardship, and there are also moments where I'm like, I just shut up there for a moment. And then there are also moments of deep calm. And for me, the effort is worth that.
Okay. Just to go back to the 10 years question, do you see yourself having a family, raising a family?
I do sometimes, and my partner and I talk about it. I feel like in many ways my role, my job is mothering others. So like at teacher trainings, often people will come up with questions, and so I feel like I get a chance to be nurturing, to offer support. I also volunteer with an organization of children in Guatemala. And so I work with children and I love it. So I feel like very much I have the opportunity to offer love to children. I would love to be a mother, also like a biological mother. And also I think it needs to be a really conscious decision and not something that happens. So I think that I'm 35, soon 36. So I know there is a time limit for that, for us women. But I don't feel like I did before, a sense of pressure. Like if I didn't do it, then I wouldn't be a full woman. Like a younger version of me was like, well, you have to be a mother
By a certain age.
Yeah, exactly. Or whereas now I feel my life is so full, and I contribute or I aspire to at least to contribute positively to people's lives, that no longer feels like a necessity. It's more like, yeah, that would be beautiful to be pregnant and create a little person and give them love. And yeah, I think that could be so beautiful. But I currently don't own a home. I don't get maternity leave, things that when you work in corporate, for example, might seem a little bit easier. It's like, okay, I have these things. So yeah, perhaps not. And I feel genuinely now at peace with either.
Okay. Because I was curious to know, if you did, how would that work with like traveling, or you're just centered now in Guatemala? So
I'm very happy in Guatemala, so I don't feel like right now I don't feel like I want to pick up my backpack and go, but also I think I will always want to come to Europe to visit my family, but I think that could be an easily done trip. So I think my way of parenting would probably be quite atypical, in the sense that to continue to do what I'm doing, I may have to have the baby with me. My partner also doesn't have a typical like job setup, so hopefully we could take it in turns. But I'm quite open to that, to offering a child a very different or an atypical way of life.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you for coming on.
Thank you.
One thing I want to end on is, at Woman Up, our aim is to inspire, educate and elevate women who are on their journey to becoming their best selves. So if you could give, or if you wanted the audience to take away one golden nugget from you or your story, what would you want it to be?
Can it be a few nuggets?
Sure.
Trust, believe, and try again. So don't give up, because I think sometimes it requires some effort. Often it requires some effort. There have been many times where I've doubted, I've been scared, I've questioned myself, and all of that. And also I've continued believing and trusting and being willing to, it's not linear. It's messy, it's confusing. Sometimes whatever your dream is, most probably it's not going to be a step-by-step to success. And redefining success, I think, to well-being, happiness.
Yeah.
long nugget. But
I love that though. Yeah.
Thank you. And thank you so much for what you're doing, because I think it's so important to share this message. And I know a while back, a younger version of me would have loved to listen to a podcast like this of two women sharing and hearing that it is possible, that there are ways of doing things that society tells us that maybe we can't.
Yeah. And actually, how do people connect with you? Because I know you said your Instagram is non-existent anymore.
Email? I'm on Facebook as Melissa Tatiana, Tatjyana. I'll share with you my email. You probably already have it, if that can be somewhere that people can access it. But our yoga school is Breath Body Earth.
Okay.
And we do have a website, we have an Instagram account, and Breath Body Earth at the moment is just Rachel and I. So if you write to the inbox of Breath Body Earth, you'll be speaking either with me or with Rachel.
Yeah.
And we're always happy to connect with people if they're uncertain about whether they want to, do a teacher training or not. If they just want to have a chat, sometimes we'll just have a phone call. We're here for it.
Yeah. When is your next yoga teacher training?
It's in November and we're almost full. We have, I think, 2 spaces left, but we also have a retreat here at the Croft in October, a weekend retreat. And we'll have a 300 hour for people who already have a 200 hour in April in Panama. And then the following November, we'll have another 200 hours. So the idea is to have that rhythm, but all the information is on our website.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
It's been amazing. Episode 1.